Sneedville. Hey, we're going to talk about the Battle of Powell River today. I have a handful of instances that you guys have taken this battle and run with it and run it, and we're going to go down those real quick, but just to refresh your memory. I know it's been a while. I've been distracted by another project, which I think you're going to love coming up. We're going to do a preview on, or an introduction rather. We did the preview, a little 30-second teaser trailer the other day that's very confusing. We're going to do a nice long video that explains that in more detail on the 21st. However, I have to reshoot that video because it's already out of date. To bring you up to speed on Sneedville, this is what are we calling these guys? We're calling these the Harlan Blitz. They are in Duffield. Today is October 3rd, and on October 3rd, they march into this enemy village. It's an E-class village, and they take it without a fight. Tomorrow is the 4th. It starts to rain on the 4th. Is that right? No, it's on the 4th. It is clear, and then on the 5th, these guys decide we're not walking in the mud. Is that a smart idea? I don't know. We'll find out in a few days. You don't want to get bogged down on the road. Really bad for morale. However, we're talking about this little fight right here. The Jones Army, you guys decided that the Army of the Pines needed to come down and directly confront and at least throw some bodies at Sneedville, the primary objective of this campaign. About halfway between the Army of the Pines and Jonesville Army, you guys decided that the best thing for the Kingsport armies to do was to take the fight. Hey, listen, we're in a good position. If we lose a fight, we can fall back and fight a defensive battle. Defense is king in this kind of basin and range, hill and valley terrain. So Jones' army has met the Army of the Pines, and that's what we're talking about here. Just to kind of look at the strategic situation, we do have an army here that's threatening Tazewell, and that will threaten the Army of the Pines' supply lines. However, if Sneedville and Bean Station, you can see Bean Station is cut off. If Sneedville gets cut off, these guys are going to be out of supply. So things are heating up here. They're also in hot pursuit by the Army of the East right here. Be that as it may, let's take a look at the Powell River. Now, this is what the Powell River looks like today. I pulled this off of Google Earth. You can see that it is a fairly broad river. It's not particularly fast moving, but it has steep banks. It's down in a deep gully. The best place to cross is going to be at a bridge. If you're not at a bridge, any contested crossing is going to fail. So here is what these two armies look like. The Army of the Pines has 2 units of foot, 2 horse, 2 guns. The Army of Jones has 3 foot, 3 horse, and 2 guns. Oh, there's also, we have 3 companies of men that arrived the day before on the part of the Knox villains. And so that adds a little wrinkle to this fight. Although they're outnumbered, getting a unit there first does allow for some interesting opportunities that some of our contestants have taken. To remind those of you that are new to this Sneedville campaign, I'm going to show you a handful of instances of battles that were run on other people's tables. I'm not running any of these fights. We're going to take a little vote. You guys decide which one you think is the one that should be the official canon fight. Really, this is an intellectual exercise to see how different people on different tables can take the same fight and wind up with very different results. Spoilers, the results today aren't all that different. Big spoilers, the Jones Army probably should have stayed home. For some reason, all of our contestants today, everybody that submitted a battle report, had the Jones Army on the offensive. Now, these two armies were going to meet, and who was actually going to attack who wasn't really clearly defined. They're both on the offensive. These guys thought they were going to be marching and kicking somebody out of Sneedville. These guys thought they were going to be marching to bottle somebody up in Middlesboro. Or this is actually Harrogate, this small sister city on the other side of the Cumberland Gap. This is the Cumberland Gap over this ridge right here. So, oddly enough, everybody said, yeah, the Army of the Pines is going to take a defensive stance. Jonesville, the Army of Jones, is going to take an offensive. And man, did they really take a beating for it. So and maybe that's because the Army of Jones so outnumbers them. Now, I put together just a quick video saying this is how I would run it. We would meet somewhere here between the Powell River and this ridge down here in the bottom right corner. And then here's taking a look at what the topo map looks like. You've got the Powell River up on the north. You got the ridge down on the south. So that kind of constrains your table north and south. And then your armies are coming in from the east and the west. And many of our battles do fit this mold, but not all of them. Not all of them. So let's go ahead and take a look first at the battle. And this is in no particular order. Over on Twitter, Belloc, is it Belloc of Hilaire? I can't remember now. He gives us this case. Now, He is running this battle using Ian K's pike and shot rules. One of the other things we don't specify is what rules to use, or even what era. We know we've got horse, foot, and guns, so we may be doing this chronologically, inadvertently. As you can see, he is gaming in 2mm. Ian K's box of pike and shot rules is written to be used with the 2mm strips available from your regular miniatures, as is. I base mine, but Hilaire here does not. Or, I'm sorry, it's Balakapot here. There it is. He does not. As you can see, he just goes ahead and uses those strips as is. It works really well. And in his case, he runs a rather interesting fight because it looks a lot like the map that I showed you before. He's got the forces of Knoxville down here in this. He's just using graph paper. This is a 2-foot by 2-foot battle with yarn for the river and roads, and it does the job. It works a treat. Nice, compact, and there are plenty of individual units. As you can see, he's got 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10 individual maneuver units. Now, Ian K's rules specify that the general has to put 2 units on the left, 2 in the right, 2 in the center, and then 2 in the backup. And there might even be 1 more unit behind that. I can't remember. Each of those kind of wings of the army gets ordered at the same time, and the blue arrows indicate the army of Jones marching down the road, trying to knock these guys off the hill. It doesn't go very well. In fact, here I put a couple little markers down so you can see. Interestingly, however, so you've got the up in the center part of the fight here, you've got a couple of infantry just, hey diddle diddle, just running right down that road trying to force the hill. They get repulsed. Well, down here on what would be the Knoxville right flank, you have a unit of cavalry supported by a unit of artillery. Remember how I said you have to order each flank together? The cavalry win this fight for the Knoxville. They run down off the hill, and that means, based on the rules, the artillery has to come along. You've been seconded to them. They come down the hill, and although the King's portions lose this fight, they do wind up capturing a whole lot of Knoxville guns. And then I just pulled off these so you can see here. The Pennington, here's the Kingsport. They suffered some pretty hefty casualties, but they did capture the Harrogate battery guns. For their part, Knoxville suffered less casualties, but their men are now gunless. It's going to take some time to prepare some new ones. So that's kind of an interesting fight with a little bit of back and forth. Next, we are going to look at a fight that is given to us by a fella by the name of Hasdrubal. He's got a blog. I'm going to put links to all of these battles reports in the description. So if you want to go read them in a little more detail, go for it. So Hasdrubal is using Tabletop Simulator, and he is using Rebels and Patriots. Nice. And what he did, now he took very good advantage of, I should say, he had the Knoxvillians take very good advantage of the orphans arriving a day early. He dumped them, and you can see here what the battlefield looks like for him. This little copse of trees here in the center is going to house a little bit of surprise. It's Riley Woods. It's going to house a little surprise. The orphans come leaping out, and what they lack in numbers, they more than make up for when surprise. They are able to do damage all out of proportion to their numbers because of that surprise. We see a little bit, and then the other nice thing about this one is it's a fairly straight up fight aside from that. And as a result of the action, we get our first real taste of how good artillery can be. Rebels and Patriots is designed for kind of 7 Years' War, sneaking up a little bit into kind of the early Napoleonics, maybe. And the artillery engage in a duel. They do a lot of damage, but for the King's portions, again, they leave their artillery exposed, and they lose both units of guns. However, in this case, for Hasdrubal, the Knoxvillians take an enormous amount of casualties. It is very much a Pyrrhic victory. We'll have to go back and look and run the actual numbers if this is the one you guys decide on. The Knoxville cannot afford very many victories like this. However, they did manage to grab the guns of Jones' army, which is going to make things a lot easier next week if we all decide that the Army of the East is going to make a run for Sneedville. It's going to be a lot harder to defend without those guns. And this final shot here is I believe it's General Patton quitting the field. His unit of cavalry, he was attached to a unit of cavalry, and here we're looking kind of from the west to the east. as he decides it's time to beat feet and get up and get going. Now we are looking at Live Free or Die. In our first video entry done to us, brought to us by Hex to Hex, fine channel in its own right. Normally, you can tell from the title, he plays Hex and Counter War games. He had a buddy over, McMurray. He's one of these Wiley Games crews, one of those Central States guys that we love. He is a frequent guest on the Chronicles of Not Jay. Go follow Chronicles of Not Jay as well. Whole video on how Live Free or Die works. This is a rule set. I believe it's free on the internets. And as you can see, you've got a very similar table setup. They are using, I believe it is 6mm figures. And Live Free or Die, he has the Knoxville forces already on the table. They've taken the two hills to the north and south. Looks very similar to what we've seen so far. The King's portions are marching along the road, and it's going to take them some time to shake out into line of battle. When they do, they are able to make some pretty good pushes. They're able to push the Knoxvillians off that hill to the north. They're able to drive them back in the center. However, reinforcements, the reserve is brought up. Live Free or Die, I should point out, is a Civil War era rule set. Works just great. The reinforcements you see coming up in the north are able to kind of flank that line. I think the infantry line probably would have taken that northern hill if they had had another turn or two, but unfortunately for them, the cavalry show up and they get chased off. So the results you can see here, Knoxville holds the line. Once again, Kingsport, not a great day for the Kingsport cannons, is it, guys? And they lose all of their guns. They are going to have to fall back. But in our next entry, this comes our way by way of, let me just check my notes, make sure I get it right. This is, Major O'Malley. And Major O'Malley does something very different. He runs a little bit of a solo wargaming guide. In the solo wargaming guide, what you do is you pick 3 strategies for each side independently. Kingsport, what are your 3 top strategies going to be? 1, 2, 3. Knoxville, not knowing what Kingsport is doing, what are yours? 1, 2, 3. You roll your d6s, you compare. And so in his case, we have to kind of rewind a little bit. The Jones army is a little slow getting off the block. And instead of fighting, so let me move these out of the way. Instead of fighting here at the crossroads, which is what everyone else did, he has these guys taking a little bit longer, and they get stuck here at, this is called Stucky Gap. And it is a very narrow gap through a ridge, through here, and the 450, what we're calling the orphans, they show up and they plug that gap. And so his game is more a case of, can this whole army force the gap before the Army of the Pines shows up? And again, those strategies came about as a result of using this solo wargaming guide. So this battlefield looks very different. Let's take a look at that. And he actually looks at Parky Gap, and here is what Parky Gap looks like on a topographic map. You can see it's a nice broad valley down there. We could probably take a look at that on Google Earth. In fact, if I remember, I'll do that, and I'll plug it in here. But more importantly for now, what you see is the tabletop and how good that looks with all those trees and a nice narrow defile, trying to force your way through. And once again, for Major O'Malley, things do not go well for the forces of Kingsport. Jones' army, a little too big for their britches, I guess. They run out, and really, the best bet for them probably would have been to try to hold Stucky Gap themselves. Drop some cannons in there, supported by a little bit of infantry, make the Army of the Pines come to them. However, I will say this. One of the things we're modeling here, without being explicit about it, is the fact that you and I have perfect knowledge of what both armies' intentions are. The generals on the ground do not. All they have are their orders: march along this road, make contact with the enemy, and push him back. The Army of Jones can't afford to take some casualties. They're buying time. Remember, once we get to snowfall, now it's early October, but if we can get through another 4 weeks, in November, the snows are likely to start to fall. So the forces of Knoxville, or Kingsport rather, are really playing a delaying game. And here, just to kind of show you, these bars right here. So here we are on, and spoiler alert, Remember we were talking about Tazewell? It's going to rain on the 5th, 6th, and 7th. So on the 7th, we're here in the heavy rains. Well, there's a very good chance when we get to know October. Wait. Am I in the wrong month? September? October? Oh, my goodness. You know what? We have our first snowfall on the 7th. I was looking at this wrong. We're actually going to experience... I got to go back and redo this. Boy. You know what? Let's go ahead and resolve this right now while we're looking at it. Here's October. This is the column I should have been dealing with. As you can see, I have us marked down for some, it's pretty rough weather here in the first week of October. Our turn ends on the 7th. That's when we stop shoving armies around. We are fighting a battle here on the 3rd. And then I'm going to go ahead and lock in the next 3 days. Clear, light rain, heavy rain. Now, I made that mistake. We really should have been over here in this column, which would have meant instead of clear, we would have had light rain, heavy rain, snow, snow. I already locked it in. I am going to unlock Mea Culpa on the 7th rather than this heavy rain. So essentially what we did is we moved down, over, and down. On the 7th, we are going to have our first day of snow. What does that mean? Well, remember on our chart, every day we roll, on a 1 or a 2, we move up 1, on a 3 or 4, we stay, and on a 5 or 6, we move down. So if we roll a 3 and a 4 for the 8th, we get snow, and a 3 and a 4 for the 9th, that's our 3rd day of snow in a row, everything shuts down. I know the first week of October for this area here, remember our map is right about on the, this is the Mason-Dixon line running right through here. Down here in Tennessee, snow in early October, that is unusually early. If that's the case, you got to hand it to the King's Portions. You know, their Farmer's Almanac nailed it. They got in. They held on tight. Maybe moving these guys into position was smarter than we realized after all. But we can't get too far ahead of ourselves. Remember that you got to play out the rest of this turn for the 7th. When we are done moving armies around and we say, okay, the 7th is over, new orders will go out. And I will remind you guys that our War Council for both Kingsport and Knoxville will be able to take into account the fact that they know that it's snowing today and likely, so if we roll a 5 or 6, we come to the top of the chart. That's heavy rain, light rain, and I tell you, you guys who decided that the Harlan Blitz should hunker down there in Duffield, good on you, smart call, because they're going to be socked in for a good long while. So let's go back to our video now. After my little mea culpa and explanation of how we're going to kind of amend this and stick a patch over it and soldier on. Boy, I'm glad I showed this to you guys. You guys are doing some excellent quality control for me. We are going to have our first day of snowfall. 3 days of snow ends the campaign, remember. So if the snowfall stays, I might have to do some weather effects for next week on camera. October 7th will be our first day of snow. There is one other battle that I want to show you, but I have to admit I can't. This comes to us by way of a fine gentleman named... Where are you, fine gentleman? Here we go. Napoleon 1066 sent me a link to a Facebook page. I don't actually have Facebook, so I don't know what happens in his fight. In the next couple of days, I'll bring that up, and maybe we'll do another video here in a few days, kind of outlining some of these other fights. I know frequent commenter Caleb Hines, he's working on a battle as well. We'll give him a few days. I think maybe what we'll do is we'll put together a poll for all of the fights that we have so far, and we'll pick a leading contender out of that poll. I'll put that up. It'll go live right after this video, and then we can kind of figure out which of these we like best. To be honest with you, based on our results, you're not voting for whether Knoxville or Kingsport wins this one. You're just looking for who takes the most damage. And we're going to identify them by who submitted them. It'll either be, and I may even, well, let's go ahead and count real quick. We've got Hasdrubal, Belloc and Poitiers, Hex to Hex, and Major O'Malley. Those are the 4 that we're going to put in that first poll. We may need to start doing brackets because you guys are amazing. I am really impressed with the variety that we're seeing. I don't even think I mentioned that Major O'Malley, he is using the Men Who Would Be Kings, very similar to the battle fought using Rebels and Patriots, but just different enough. The Men Who Would Be Kings was originally written for colonial era, so it is a very different rule set, but you get a somewhat similar result, gotta say. And both of those are part of the Osprey series, but it's Dan Mersey's. Is it Dan Mersey? Who did Dragon Rampant? I think that's Dan Mersey. So very similar play styles, and very similar results, and very similar amounts of fun. The big thing here, the big takeaway message here is You're fighting a defensive fight. You know, when we put together our new strategies, we really need to take that into consideration, that at least in this portion of the map, defense is king. And I don't know how that's going to color your voting, but it will certainly, I think it should color how we present our strategies for both sides. Do you really need to attack here? Is it really worth spilling all of the blood, or or should you consider probing, finding gaps, and getting into the other team's backfield? Make them fight you to get supplies. That may be the way to go. So there you go. That's our initial, we'll call it the first bracket. In the next few days, we'll get a couple of more possible results, and we'll just have to do it that way. A little bit more complicated, but I think in the end, we're taking our time on this one. And honestly, just to warn you, starting next week, we've got a bonkers fight that we're going to be playing out. I don't want to give out too many spoilers because it's going to be happening in real time. I think you're going to love it. Make sure you tune in. Until then, I'm praying for you.